Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Friday, everybody. Today we are going to take a look at Venus's entrance into the sign of Gemini, where Venus is about to conjoin with the Sun and go through the reset in her synodic cycle. This happens depending on when you start the cycle in direct motion or retrograde motion. The reset of the cycle and the changing of Venus from evening star to morning star or morning star to evening star happens when Venus and the Sun conjoin. So we're looking at a transition right now for Venus either way. And we're going to talk about some of the significations of that shift, what Venus's rebirth might mean, broadly speaking, on an archetypal level. And then I'm going to show you 3 chart examples that illustrate what this reset can look like. These are examples from people I know personally, not from clients, but this time like friends and family members and that kind of thing. Going back in time a little bit, though, and as a way of looking at what happened during a previous Venus reset in the sign of Gemini, which last took place, at least this one that I'm looking at, in around June of 2020, right as the pandemic was really getting started. So anyway, that's what we're going to do today as a way of preparing ourselves for the upcoming reset of Venus's cycle with the Sun. All right, well, before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, share your comments and reflections if you have them now, or come back to the video and share a story as Venus and the Sun conjoin in the upcoming weeks. If you have one to share, come back and hit us up. We'd love to hear from you. You can always send us your story also at the email address grabbed@nightlightastrology.com, or use the hashtag grabbed and tell us your story. Be getting around to a storytelling episode again soon. And you can find a transcript of any of these daily talks on the website, nightlightastrology.com. Over at Nightlight Astrology, I want to show you the website. You can go to the courses tab. First year course coming up starts pretty soon. We're looking at a June 16th start date for the new first year course in ancient Hellenistic astrology. Of course, there is need-based tuition assistance. If you need any help, you can check out everything the course includes on that page. You are free to use the need-based tuition option up till the start of the program. The early bird sale is over, but we still do have payment plans available if you want to use one of them as well. And then we also have, under the events tab, live talks. In the month of June, I will be doing a talk on the 12th house. That is June 13th. You can register for that. And you can check out the other talks I've done in my monthly webinar series dating back several months now. If you missed them, you can also pick any of those up and get the recording. Finally, horary astrology course begins on June 22nd. And if you stick around after I sign off today, you will hear me discuss what the horary class is about and show you an example of a horary reading. It's a very specific type of traditional predictive astrology. It's very magical. And if you're interested in that course, you need a little bit of a background in traditional astrology to join that one. But if you do have that kind of background, you're welcome to join us in June for the start of that program. And again, when I sign off today, there's an informational video about the course that's tagged on after the regular content is over. Okay, well, on that note, let us now shift our attention to Venus's upcoming rebirth. What to watch for? What does it mean? Let's put the real-time clock up first. And now what I'm going to do is, first of all, let's take a look at this upcoming. Let me move this forward just a touch. So you'll see that the Sun and Venus enter Gemini shortly, right after each other. So here we are on Friday, May 24th, and Venus has entered Gemini. Really, really fascinating that the synodic reset of Venus is happening just after Venus, the host of the Jupiter-Uranus dynamic, connects with both of those planets. And of course, Jupiter enters Gemini. So it's as though there is this interesting connection or story being told between the house of Taurus in our charts and the house of Gemini. They are seamlessly connected right now. As both Venus, the ruler of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and Jupiter follow each other into Gemini really closely here at the end of the month. Anyway, so let's play this out a little bit. You can see that the two planets come closer and closer together. This could be seen as a little bit of a difficult time for Venus because Venus no longer has the chariot status that she had in Taurus, where she's protected from the combustion of the Sun by virtue of being in her own sign. So things might be just a little bit more challenging or stressful for Venus coming into the end of May and beginning of June. And then we see the cazimi start happening here. This is June 2nd. And then you can see the two are sticking within about half a degree. on June 3rd. And then they're exactly conjoined at the same minute and same degree on June 4th. And then on June 5th, they remain together. June 6th, they're still together within about half a degree, right? And now they start separating, where you get almost that full degree of separation going on by June 8th. So if we back this up to where we are at today, we are really at the outset of Venus's combustion process, which is going to last a little while. So it could mean that initially there are some challenges with respect to the whole sign house of Gemini in our chart. There's some shifts and changes happening there, that things we have to accommodate that are not altogether easy. There's a little bit of stress or tension. I don't think it's so bad because Jupiter enters Gemini, so we got another benefic present in the house. Mercury will enter Gemini not too long down the road and be the supporting there as the host. So it's not like the world's worst combustion, but this combustion does kind of continue all the way up until we get to right about June 1st. Between June 1st and 2nd, that's when we start getting that powerful moment of cazimi, and the rebirth happens, where Venus is actually starting to be intensely activated and reborn through the conjunction with the sun. And so then what happens is Venus will start separating from the sun, and gradually, as it gains distance, will start appearing as the evening star. So we don't get that 15 degrees of separation that we need to see for Venus to emerge as the morning star until later in July. So here you can see that Venus, by about the middle of July, is still just 11 degrees apart from the sun. We want to get it to about 15. So that's going to take just a little bit of time. Here we have them about 13 degrees away. And now we're just about at the point where they're 15 degrees away here by the end of July. It's like mid to late July where you really start seeing Venus appearing in all of her glory, having gone through this transformational process that is at its sort of most acute stage here at the end of May and beginning of June in terms of the reset. And then it's the gradual appearance of Venus back into the evening star position, where she's happiest, because the evening star is, of course, the position associated with the feminine or yin energy, and Venus is happiest in that spot. So anyway, that's the large, long process of it. What we want to think about right now is, what does this mean for us? Between now and these dates in early June, here is what we might notice. And you may want to look at this in terms of the topics of the whole sign house of Gemini in your birth chart. Keep that in mind. But number one, whenever Venus is going through combustion and rebirth, whether it's going toward morning star or evening star, you're going to see significant changes in relationships. Venus can point to friendships. Venus can point to love and romance, and partnerships in that respect. Whatever kind of style or orientation you have, doesn't matter. It's just relationships in general. Could be sisters or women, sometimes very specific significations of Venus, but also friends. Doesn't really matter, gender or sex. So Venus can mean that there are important shifts in relationships. That's a broad meaning that we have for Venus right now. And again, you may want to even look at this as a shift that's leading from the whole sign house of Taurus to Gemini with respect to how relationships are changing. Could we see the topics of that house of Taurus connected to Gemini with respect to the total transformation that's happening? If you really wanted to track the transformational process out, move it through Cancer and into Leo too, as the summer goes on. But start for now just with, I would say, looking at Taurus and Gemini, or specifically Gemini. The second thing we might watch for is the gradual, in some cases maybe more rapid, reorientation of values. When we say values, we don't mean that Venus is connected to Taurus and Taurus to the second house, and the second house is the house of values and all of that. No. The only reason we would connect Venus to values is because Venus herself is the definition of valuable. She is the prized possession. She is everything that is like splendorous, splendific, and beautiful and desirable. She is the crowning jewel. She is the ornamentation of life. Anything that we say, that's beautiful, I want that, I want to have or possess that. We can't really have or possess Venus. But we like to surround ourselves with beautiful things, whether it's the clothing we wear or the tattoo body art we have or whatever. So when we say a reorientation of values, what we mean is what we have, what we possess, what we place value on, whether that's a quality within us or something physical or material. We're talking about how we define what is beautiful, valuable, and attractive in our life. Again, that could be abstract as in a quality or a virtue, or it could be something very physical like a material item or possession. But what we're talking about is a shift with respect to what we see or place value on, what we desire or want, what we believe will bring us happiness or satisfaction, what we consider to be beautiful and ornamenting our lives. So that is a Venusian signification in general. And anytime Venus is going through the reset or a retrograde or a station, you can think about a shift in value, what we place value on, or what we have, or what we possess, or what we desire, or what we lust after, maybe in a not so good way. Number 3 is new or different ideas, philosophies, organizational strategies, new use of technology. This has to do with the fact that the reorientation of values is taking place in the double-bodied air sign of Mercury. And so the values may shift specifically with respect to things that are very airy and mercurial, hence ideas, philosophies, communication strategies, organizational approaches, technology, and so forth. One thing that's really interesting is also that Venus in Gemini in particular has a relationship to games and to what we do for fun. Mercury, most people don't know this, Mercury Hermes was traditionally associated with sports. Because Mercury goes back and forth and moves very swiftly, Mercury was associated with things like, like pickleball or racquetball or tennis or anything that like a basketball going back and forth on a court or a field. The back and forth nature of Mercury, as well as its speed, was a reason that Mercury ends up being associated, broadly speaking, with sports. Venus in Gemini is therefore also associated with games and anything that you do for fun that is pleasurable and has a kind of back and forth, playful, competitive quality to it. And so another thing that can happen, just broadly speaking, is that you can see a shift with respect to what you do for fun or pleasure. And how you experience joy or pleasure, which could translate into playfulness in the bedroom or opening yourself up to different kinds of people or relationships that stimulate new thoughts and ideas that are fun. So think about that as well. Anyway, I want to give you 3 examples from my client practice that kind of illustrate for you what this kind of change can look like. So I'm going to put the chart back up on the screen, and we're going to go back in time. Let's go back to 2020. In 2020, in the month of June, we had a Venus Sun cazimi. So here they are coming together. There was a lot of big collective events happening in the month of June of 2020, by the way. But these are personal examples. So I'm going to show you what this looks like by virtue of a few whole sign house placements. So this was a Venus retrograde, not a direct motion. So Venus was changing to morning star, not evening star. So there might be some subtle differences in terms of these examples versus the kinds of events we may experience right now, but not so big that it makes a huge difference. The Venus going in direct motion into a conjunction with the Sun in Gemini, and Venus going through the same thing by retrograde, is just telling us that Venus was moving into morning star then, is moving into evening star now. The transformation is the same with respect to the kinds of significations we might see broadly speaking, and you'll see exactly what I mean here in a second. So example number 1 takes place with Taurus rising in this conjunction in the second house. Now, this is my chart, and I'm going to share my own story first, and then I'll show you 2 other examples. So around this time, what happened was we found out that this was several years ago. I think things may have changed now with respect to Stripe. But Stripe dropped us as a processor because they considered us to be a high-risk merchant because they categorized us as like psychic services. And so PayPal did the same thing. So suddenly we had to come up with a new merchant processor for all of our programs, all of my readings, everything. This is in the second house of, money, finances. And so this was the implementation of an entirely new organizational strategy, a new tech platform for our programs. Like we had to do a ton of work on the website. We had to shift a ton of student billing profiles. I mean, it was just a huge amount of work. And we had to get a high risk merchant processor that would take on someone who, like, our business at the time, and I think things have actually lightened up a little bit since then. I've heard some astrologers being able to use Stripe now. But at the time, it was like, oh, yeah, you need a merchant processor who will take people who like sell guns, pornography, like, because I guess fortune tellers is the way that they were perceiving what we're doing, even though I was like, oh gosh, it's really unfortunate because it's not at all what we're doing. But I mean, broadly speaking, they saw us as the same kind of risk as like a psychic hotline. So as this Venus combustion, cazimi, and then reset took place, we had to change our merchant processors, and that was a huge ordeal. It was a huge shift. It also led to some other really great changes, though, because, you know, when it's time to make a shift like that, sometimes you catch other things that, like, well, as long as we're changing this, we might as well do this, which can help us improve our services or whatever. So I thought you guys might like that example, kind of a neat example of a reorientation of tech strategies, organizational strategies. It's a very Venus and Gemini kind of thing that came up. All right, let's go to the 7th house. This is from somebody that I know whose name will remain anonymous, and I'll just kind of do my best to protect their identity generally. So what I found really, really interesting about this was that this was, okay, so this is a Venus reset happening in the 7th house. Leading up to this in late May, of course, Venus is combust and coming into the conjunction in early June. This is someone I know whose spouse went through a significant mental and emotional, let's call it a healing crisis. So spouse basically had kind of like a mental nervous decompensation or breakdown. At the heart of that breakdown was the use of alcohol, right? So this was kind of hitting a rock bottom moment. This began a process of deep relational healing and revision. And thankfully, the couple survived, but this was the beginning of the end of a pattern of disease and sickness within a marriage and within a spouse, right? So, you know, 12-step came next, like that. You get the idea. There it is, a shift in relationship. I mean, it's quintessential Venus retrograde, combustion, reset with the cazimi in the 7th house. Now, most of you are going to go, oh, well, that was a Venus retrograde. It's different than this. We place way too much emphasis on retrogrades rather than understanding the entirety of a Venus synodic cycle. The direct motion, combustion, and conjunction with the sun and the emergence into the evening star is just as important a transformation with just as much value and impact as the retrograde, right? We always think that the retrograde is more intense, but both transitions for Venus are very potent. And both will often signify the exact same kinds of things, especially when Venus is in the combustion and then hits the cazimi. So anyway, that's a good 7th house example. Now let's go. This is someone else I know who had this exact conjunction in the 10th house. So I found this is a really interesting example that speaks to number 2 on my list, which was a reorientation of values. Okay, so basically what happened was this person who I know is a Virgo rising and has this in the 10th house was part of a process with the HR department at the company that they work for that provided feedback in a series of meetings that allowed for the letting go of and hiring of a few new people in management. And this person had to be brave enough to talk about what they thought the errors in management were. And this was nothing like, there wasn't any like super bad abuse going on or anything, but it was just serious enough that this person felt like they needed to contribute to some reporting that was finally happening that then led to a shift in several of the management positions. So I thought that was really perfect for, I mean, this grew worse, and the fear of speaking up and then actually doing it all happened during the combustion. And then the Cazimi and thereafter led to the shift in some of the staff. So you can see here that this reflects the overall change in the staff that was happening in her place of work, but it also reflects the process of speaking up and speaking out about something, which is very common, by the way, when Venus starts moving into the morning star position. That's a distinction there where it's like, even if I stand out and even if I risk some kind of discordancy for the sake of some broader definition of happiness or peace, I have to. It's a very Venus in the morning star position kind of shift. But still, it reflects a change in values and a shift in relationships within the workplace. So those are 3 examples from some people that I know that I often call on for examples, especially if and when I don't immediately have something that comes to mind from my client practice. I have a pretty good memory of my client practice and will usually be able to pull things up. But for this one, I relied on some friends. And so, yeah, the names of people and places have been changed to protect the innocent. But that's the idea. And hopefully this will even just give you some clues as to what kinds of shifts you might notice. And again, trust me when I say that the combustion in Cazimi is just as important on the direct side as it is on the retrograde side. So don't worry that 2020 example was a retrograde and therefore, we think of it as better or more important or something. Okay, that's it for today. I hope that this was useful. If you stick around after I sign off, you'll hear more about the upcoming Horary program. Our year 1 program starts in June. Got some good webinars coming up, so check all of those out. Any questions about our programs, email us info@nightlightastrology.com. Whoops, sorry, there we go. There's the email address. And yeah, we will see you guys again next week. Take it easy, everyone. Bye. Hey, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. I'm going to tell you guys more about the upcoming Horary Astrology program, which begins later in June. And I hope that if you have never learned anything about horary, that you will, at least in listening to this, be exposed to horary astrology, have a little bit of an understanding of what it is. And if not now, then maybe sometime in the future, you can take time to study it. It is one of the forms of astrology that dates back to the earliest eras of astrology, the Hellenistic era, the medieval era, the early Indian period of astrology. And it is a branch of astrology that is concerned with specific predictive questions. So, for example, a horary question is usually formed in terms of a yes or no answer, and it is cast from the location of the astrologer at the time that the astrologer receives the question. So a typical horary question might be, will I get the job? Or will we get married? Or my cat went missing, will she come back? There are applications of horary astrology that involve the location of missing items, like where is my missing pen? Or where is, I actually helped a farmer one time locate a missing bull that had gotten out of the pasture. So it's a really, really fascinating form of astrology. It's very old, and it is like the birth chart of a question, a predictive question. So again, if I receive a question from someone and it's like, will I get the job? Then I cast that chart at the time I get the question. I usually use the receipt of the email time. And then I cast a chart for that question. And there are a series of traditional techniques that have been around for a very long time, thousands of years, that are used to determine the answer to that question. So with that in mind, let me show you a chart and you can learn, see what it's like in real time. So this chart is, the question that was asked is, will my spouse keep his job? This is a woman who had some very good reason to worry that her spouse might be getting laid off. And so she wanted to know, so she could prepare herself, is he in fact going to be laid off from his job? And so when I receive that question, that's a horary question, when I receive it at 9:03 a.m. on April 10th of 2023, a little over a year ago, here in Minnetonka, Minnesota, where I live, I cast a chart that becomes the birth chart of that question. I then use a series of techniques, and that's what you're going to learn in the horary program, are those techniques that go into answering all different kinds of questions. Questions about jobs, questions about money, questions about health, questions about marriage or relationships, questions about babies, questions about in pregnancy. I mean, you name it. And even missing pets and people and missing items. You see a lot of different approaches in horary. And so over the course of a year, we study those approaches to different kinds of questions, and we practice and practice with different charts of different questions, learning the techniques so that we can have this predictive tool in our kit as an astrologer. So anyway, here's a question: will spouse keep his job? In horary, what happens is you are always looking at the planets that represent the people and aspects of the question. The person asking the question is called the querent. The querent is always given the ruler of the ascendant and usually the moon as a co-signifier of the querent. So in this case, Gemini is rising. So we're going to give Mercury to the querent and the moon. Well, we can see the moon is sitting right on the cusp of the 7th house of marriage, which shows us that the querent, the person asking the question, is indeed really concerned about their spouse. The placement of the moon gives that away because it's sitting on the cusp of the 7th, which is going to be the house of the partner. So you see little things like that. They're a little wink that you have you have a radical chart, so to speak. Now, the 7th house ruler is going to be the spouse. That's Jupiter, since Sagittarius sits on the 7th house cusp. In horary, we use quadrant-based houses because the theory was all developed through quadrant-based house systems, which is interesting. So this is the only place in my practice that I teach from and use a quadrant-based house system, not whole sign. Anyway, it's really fascinating to look at this chart because Jupiter is going to represent the spouse. So we can see Jupiter over here, about to be conjoined by the sun. Then we look at the spouse's job. And the spouse's job is going to be the 10th house from the spouse. The 10th house from the 7th is going to be the ruler of the 4th. That's called derived houses. This is something that appears in horary quite a bit. So if we take the spouse as house 1 and we count 1 through 10 from house 7, we get to the cusp of house 4 for the 10th from the 7th, or the spouse's job. That is the sun. So here we see that the sun, exalted sun in Aries, is about to conjoin Jupiter. This means that Jupiter is combust. And when Jupiter is combust like that so badly and the sun is about to conjoin it, that is a moment of death for Jupiter. So the job, we know that combustion from a planet like that is often implied in the charts of death, or that's a condition of debility for Jupiter at the hands of the exalted sun. And Jupiter is, of course, sitting on the 12th house cusp, which is the derived 6th from the 7th house of the spouse, a place that was associated with misfortune. So we can see that this is a very clear indication that that Jupiter is being debilitated by, burnt up by the job, and that moment that's coming of the conjunction could be positively looked at as maybe a death and rebirth of your career. But the first thing that's happening is the death. When it is a possibility built into the question that he could be one of the people that's about to be laid off at his company, and you have this kind of symbolism, this is very clearly a yes, your husband is about to be laid off because of that combustion and the upcoming combustion and conjunction from the sun. Now you might say, what about Cazimi? Doesn't the Cazimi mean like a rebirth? Yeah, but not first, right? The first thing that happens is that Jupiter is being burnt up by the sun. When the sun is the job and Jupiter is the spouse, and there is a possibility that this kind of event happens, then yes, that is exactly what happens. We can also see, if we take out the outer planets, which is something we toggle back and forth in our horary class, we take out the outer planets and we can also see that the very next thing that is going to happen is the moon, as an indicator of the flow of events, is about to trine the sun and then immediately hit Jupiter, which means that the moon is also translating the light from the sun to Jupiter. And when the sun is acting here as a malefic burning Jupiter up, this is another sign that the flow of events is going to lead that malefic sun to eliminate Jupiter. The malefic sun only in this context because Jupiter is combust. So anyway, these are little rules of horary, and there's a ton of them, right? For every different kind of question, there are different ways of assigning planets to the parts of a question, and there are different techniques that we use to answer the question. In that case, the judgment of the chart was, it does look as though your husband is going to be laid off, and indeed, that was the outcome. Her husband was laid off within a week. So the way that I framed it in the answer was very uplifting, because I said, this is when we see this kind of event, a Jupiter Sun Cazimi, which we've had in the sky recently just now too, as I'm making this, that can be a sign of rebirth. So even if there's a death and a loss here of job, the opportunity for this to be a career reset is also implied by the transition of this Jupiter-Sun conjunction. And she did write to me later in the summer last year to tell me that he found a new job. So, and it was indeed like a positive reset. So half of the art of horary is delivering the news. How do you deliver a predictive result without increasing someone's anxiety, in a way that's constructive? How do we take what we see and translate it for someone when the question is predictive? And there's often a lot of, people have a lot of emotion invested in the outcome. So this is a beautiful form of astrology. If you are interested in studying it, here is how to register. You go over to the website, which is nightlightastrology.com, and you are going to go to the courses page. And when you're on the courses page, you're going to click on the horary course. You need to have a background in understanding dignities, aspects, and house meanings. And then it starts on June 22nd. At the bottom, you will find that there is need-based tuition assistance. And there are also payment plans that you can utilize, and a one-time payment saves a little bit of money. So, but if you need tuition assistance because it would be impossible for you to take the program otherwise, please be sure to check that out and come study horary. It's an amazing, amazing form of astrology. If I could do nothing but practice horary, I would, because it is so interesting to see the unique picture of each situation come to life in the context of a horary reading. There's no birth chart needed for it either. It's amazing that astrology can work that way. We always think, oh, it has to work off from a birth chart. No. We can use astrology just like we use tarot cards. Cast them out at the moment a unique question comes up. Cast a chart at the moment of a question, and you have a series of techniques and approaches that can help you answer it. So that's horary in a nutshell. I hope to see you guys there, and thanks for listening.